Hi, everybody who's just joining us. We're reviewing what we might see in 2025. So Maelstrom is a dynamic procedural damage system. Harkens back to games we've seen in various places in the past, but a lot of those games were either single player or multiplayer on a smaller scale. This is a little bit insane, in my opinion, because it's modeling everything based on cantilever beams. It's running stress analysis on them. It is measuring their thickness, their Young's modulus, their strength, all of the different things. And it's basically just meant, I think this is part of the underlying system that builds crafting. One of the things that they don't really talk about when they mention Maelstrom is the underlying bits of this system, I think, were starting to be worked on back in like 2016, 2017. They were doing something called Item 2.0, which was very much based on ships and making sure ships work, but it also added characteristics to materials in the game. So oil had the characteristic of being wet, or I don't know, goopy? I'm not sure. Steel has a certain level of ability to break apart. Wood also can fracture at certain levels of like getting hit, stuff like that. So they did this for different types of materials on a much lower scale than what we're seeing right now. But back at that time, it was mainly meant for the damage system. So like when you shot a ship, that ship would have a material that would correspond to whatever damage it would take. So lasers could do something, ballistics could do something, stuff like that. That was quiet for a very long time. We haven't heard about it in a while, and now we're seeing Maelstrom. But Maelstrom's also coming at the same time as crafting, which also is talking about the idea of material qualities and different types of materials, and what are those materials being used to make things. So if we look at things like damage system, crafting system, and even the salvage system, you start to see that there's this whole underlying part of Star Citizen that depends on this idea of material understanding and material statistics. If you salvage a certain ship, depending on what you salvage, you'll get that material back. That's RMC, and construction materials will probably go away at some point. If you want to build a ship, you have to get certain types of those materials to build it. That's where the crafting system comes in. And then the breakability part is just like what you would see from, I don't know, Battlefield Bad Company or something like that. So Maelstrom specifically is the breakability part, but I do think that it links into the stuff that also drives crafting. That's my point. Is I don't think that this idea of material specificity and statistics is just for Maelstrom. There we go. I was trying to figure out how to put that into a sentence.
We want players' intuitive prediction of the effect a weapon or a collision has to actually happen in the engine or in the game. So we decided to move away from hit point pools or other abstract models to simulate damage, but rather have damage be calculated from a physical model and from the physical material properties of each entity. If something breaks off due to its structural integrity decreasing below a certain threshold, Maelstrom allows it to break off in a realistic fashion. If you shoot off a wing, the missiles and weapons on that wing should still remain attached. If the broken off part still has power, electric items should still function. This means Maelstrom was needed to be designed to work with a hierarchical setup to begin with. From the hierarchical representation of the geometry we want to break off, to the same hierarchy on a higher level item for items like power plants, lights, weapon systems, and so on. Maelstrom is persistence and networking ready. We designed it from the ground up to work with high latency situations, to persist and replicate easily. To achieve all this, we gave each physical geometry instance an identifier to be able to uniquely identify it within the universe. So your gladius wing is your gladius wing. We added physical material and damage properties that can now be replicated across the network. One of them, and that's the most important one, we call integrity. And this determines how much structural or internal integrity a physical geometry has. Integrity is modified from dissipating, or rather absorbing, energy from kinetic impacts or energy weapons, and also in the future from absorbing energy from external factors like extreme temperature or fire, as you've seen before. We also track which physical part or geometry belongs to which visual geometry and which high-level entity. So if the...
Like what? So yeah, somebody asked, will the rubble fall down the same on each client? That's what it sounds... I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't. That's how usually these things work. It's going to be data that's sent up to the replication layer. So I would assume, but maybe not.
Structural or internal integrity collapses, we know which visual geometry is affected and which item might be affected as well. So a power plant will cease to emit power or implode, explode. A weapon will cease to fire, and so on. To make things break apart, we create what we call breakable clusters. A breakable cluster is a set of physical geometry, the visual geometry, and the entities on top that can break off. Between breakable clusters, we create abstract cantilever beams to be able to model stress and strain. I'll go into more detail in that in a bit. Breakable clusters are hierarchical. They mirror
like,
the
dude,
hierarchy.
what the flippity man? How? Now, I will say, I think they could do it because, and they can't eliminate all lag, but they can get rid of, maybe get it down to a 1% kind of thing where you have edge cases. But to be genuinely honest, I do agree with you guys. This is just, this looks like a lot. And when they were presenting this, I was like, how does this work at scale? Like, if you have an outpost like the outposts we have in Pyro right now, and somebody, you don't even have to drop a bomb. Let's just say like multiple grenades in that outpost go off in different places. Multiple buildings are crumbling. Like, how many buildings within a proximity of one person can crumble down to the ground at the same time? It's crazy.
Of all attached entities involved. They also embed the hierarchy of all animated joints. And they also embed the hierarchy of all physical geometries. They essentially represent a ground truth of the entire hierarchy necessary to perform all our goals for Maelstrom. This image is showing a breakable cluster graph of the gladius. I'd like to show one more video of Maelstrom before we continue. We needed to find a good way to easily and efficiently determine when a breakable cluster breaks. We chose a well-established model from material sciences and structural engineering, cantilever beams. In essence, a cantilever is a structural member that has a fixed support and a free end. Forces experienced on the free end can be used to calculate the amount of stress the fixed support is enduring. The basic ideas behind that are best explained from a very simple example. If a ship were to collide with the horizontal part of the crane in the image, far from the vertical part, the fixed support would endure a higher stress as if the ship were to collide closer to the vertical part. But not only does the point of impact determine how much stress the cantilever beam experiences, also how large the surface area is connecting the cantilever and the fixed support has a large influence on when a cantilever beam will break. In our case, this actually means we analyze the cross-section of the intersection of the set of geometry from two breakable clusters to calculate the surface area. A wing attached to the body has a rather large connecting surface area compared to the surface area calculated for the stabilizers connected to the body. We then project forces from impacts and explosions onto these cantilever beams and calculate the stress the beams experience. Over time, this stress turns into strain, and if we reach a certain threshold, the beam snaps. The result, simple, efficient, and deterministic breakability. But this is not just about ships and buildings that you saw in the videos before. We want Maelstrom to be a systemic system that we can use on all types of entities. So here's some video of some test footage of AI shooting each other behind breakable cover and Maelstrom barrels. Physical material properties influence damage and breaking and have a direct influence to how things break and fracture. To achieve this, we added various properties: density, yield strength, resilience, thickness, toughness, Young's modulus. And this is more or less what I wanted to talk about Maelstrom, but I don't want to leave without showing one more video of what carnage Maelstrom can create.
So this is pretty crazy, but we've already seen some level of this starting to be simulated. Now, it's not the Maelstrom system itself, but even when we were streaming just this last stream last week, and we were shooting the thrusters off the ship, this is the same kind of thing that's going on. This is like one of the more specific applications of this is when shooting at different ships. The connections of your ship, like the actual geometry of your ship, will make a difference on how it receives damage and how it flies. So if your ship has wings, watch out. If your ship has a little pylon sticking out, watch out. If you've got thrusters that are easily segmented like Argos are, they're a little easier to target. In a ship like the Guardian, your wings are actually defending the body a little bit more. So like, there is actually a lot of application to this in terms of fighting because, well, we are going to be starting to target specific parts of ships and disabling them by shooting off certain things. And the parts that can be shot off and disabled are going to be simulated by the stress and Young's modulus and all that jazz. So it's an interesting part of the game, and it touches just about everything that we do. I do think that it's going to be limited to something. He was talking about applying it to every asset. I mean, dude, cities, they're not going to put this on buildings in cities, right? We're not taking down skyscrapers and stuff. I think this will be like ships, outposts, maybe like derelicts, but there will definitely be stuff that's got to be impossible to break here. And then a common question is like, what happens when everything gets destroyed? Are there repair missions that pop up to have people redo them? Do they redo themselves whenever everybody leaves the area? Like what exactly, what's the game plan? So a lot of questions still regarding Maelstrom, and that's why I'm a little bit less confident about that coming in 2025. I mean, maybe it'll happen, but I wouldn't set my expectations on it if I were you. I would think this is a later level thing for us to see, but at least they're working on it for Squadron. They've got to be working on it for Squadron, if not already have it working. It better be working. Where's that feature complete, huh? And just to be clear, that's because certain features work in Squadron and not in Star Citizen, so that is possible. All right, here's something that I think we could actually see in 2025, and we should follow closely. This would be the third star system. Now, this is an important thing to follow because, as I'm sure you've already seen, people are like, hey, is it going to take them 7 years to make every star system? Like, are we going to have... Is Nyx going to take the same amount of time as Pyro, taking the same amount of time as Stanton? Like, how long are we waiting? So, you know, this isn't like to say that they're close to getting Nyx in just because we can see it. But we already have played in Nyx. Well, we've played on Delamar before, the place they're about to show us. It used to be in the game. And they've been working on it for quite a while, for years now. So here is kind of the look at how... I guess what the Nyx system is. I'm not saying it's going to come next year, but I do think we're going to see it faster than we saw Pyro next year or the year after.
All right. Awesome.
So that's just a quick look at the kind of general area, but there's actually there's a decent amount of interior here that we don't even see during this presentation. So you a little more of the nearby area. The interesting part about this is it'll be the only landing zone that we get in the entire game, at least for the first 5 systems, I'm pretty sure, that has low gravity. So while most landing zones take higher levels of capacity when you're shipping, they have more going on, more things to see and do. They're all on planets, so that you have to get through the atmosphere, you have to deal with gravity, you can only get certain size ships in there. Once VTOL starts to matter, if your ship doesn't have VTOL engines, you'll have to think about that, wear and tear on your thrusters and stuff like that. It's different when you're going into atmosphere. So having a main location landing zone like this in an area that has low gravity could actually make a difference for gameplay, at least in your margins. I think they show that here in a second, or in a minute.
And that is to the hangars and landing services.
Wait, I'm sorry. This is where they drop all the thirst trap teasers. I'm looking for this video. My bad.
Ship, docking services, and docking states.
Actually, what I really liked was the you can see like down here it's almost like you have a network, like a small network of landings and tunnels, and you can use 0G to get to them. I hope that there's more of these and it's not just like a one-off sort of thing.
All right, awesome.
Yay, Levski. Okay, so like you're probably watching this and you're like, there's not really much to that. I actually think this is mainly going to be an interesting addition for cargo haulers. One more thing that they show is, well, besides the exterior cargo elevators, which are great for like big ships like Hull series. See, this is what I was talking about. You cannot trade like this at Lorville, New Babbage, Area 18, or I guess you can trade like this at Orison, because you can dock there. So that's your one other place, but even that is a higher level gravity. This is a fairly unique thing in the game right now, although it's not in the game right now. You can do it in Pyro. And then you've got this, which is basically they've taken a lot of the other places in the game, landing zones specifically, are very spread out. So you have to go different places for cargo interactions and stuff. And here they basically just show that like Levski is very centralized. Everything's, well, there's plenty of space in Levski, but when it comes to the business side of things, you can find a lot of it all right here. Right next to the actual docking collars too, which is pretty cool.
All right, cool.
So there's that. The kind of running theory is that Nyx also comes with more exploration focus, actually, because Nyx is a very interestingly placed star system. It's actually kind of inside of a nebula that makes correspondence in the system pretty difficult, navigation pretty difficult as well. So I do think that there's a chance for them to introduce more scanning and exploration focused gameplay to this system that could be kind of like in Pyro you're introducing lawlessness, in Nyx you're introducing scanning and exploration, quote unquote. So that could be something they're doing here, and that could be another group of players who are interested in this kind of a system, and they do sort of hint at that here.
By Carla Larry, during the height of the newly formed United Empire of Earth's territorial expansion. Its most defining feature, and the source of its name, is the sprawling black dust cloud that occupies most of the system. The dust cloud severely hampers visibility and can interfere with your ship's scanners. This system does, however, border with Vandal space. So, visitors are being advised there are Vandal raiding parties hitting locations throughout the system.
That's also something that they could do to introduce this. And it's interesting because I think what they'd probably do is say not introduce the Vandal with the initial system, because they probably want them to show up in Squadron 42 first, and then like a year later or so, assuming we get Squadron, you drop them in as an update.
But despite this, a small community has formed in the system. And this is on an asteroid in the belt between Nix 2 and Nix 3. And this asteroid is called Delmar.
So again, just to remind you all, we've had Delamar already. This was in the game. They've redone it a little bit for this update, but we are playing on Delamar and Levski back in 2019. So it's really up in the air whether this happens in 25 or not. I think it definitely could. It's possible, but it's not a guarantee. Another thing that they've talked about that does seem likely, they've said 12 to 18 months for this, and don't ever trust any of those dates, but this is one of the only things that actually got a date at CitizenCon, and they said 12 to 18 months for the monster hunting. This isn't that exciting to me, but I think our org will enjoy it. I think it's going to be fun for players and something extra to do on planets besides just like fighting humans and going to the same sorts of locations. This is just another activity for MMO, really. Or theme park kind of stuff. But it's also kind of sandboxy because it's not a mission. You just find these guys out there in Pyro on, I think, Monarchs. This would be considered content. The feature here would be the alien. It would be this, but the content is the ability to get is the ability to make it spawn. It's the ability to actually have a full fight with it that has different segments. It's the spawnables that come on the body. That kind of stuff is like where the content comes. The feature is just the rig of the alien that makes it move around and do stuff, So before they would be like, oh yeah, we finished these new features for these aliens and we've got the fauna working, but it wouldn't have a place in the game as content yet. So they're here introducing it as content rather than the feature first. It's a good call. Oh, that'll do a lot. Dude, did he just almost hit the Valkyrie with that? Oh. The heck, did I miss that the first time? What the did I miss this the first time? Where did this come from? Just a random medical... Oh, there he is. He was standing down there and he gets flung. Oof. Okay, so this is as you can see a sandworm. I hope everybody got the idea by that point. And this is just the first of a new like a series, basically a new series of types of gameplay that they're doing, which is we're essentially getting into the xenobiology part of science gameplay. I mean, this is kind of monster hunting, but this also includes harvesting of like aliens and stuff. So this is almost a new segment of Star Citizen starting up in that sort of science and xenobiology gameplay, which is something a lot of people want to do. I mean, this is going to factor a lot into crafting, probably factor a lot into trading, and in like, you know, rare markets and black markets and stuff like that. We've already seen other things like there's like the hide of the other alien that gets sold in Pyro, which is just terrible. We've seen a couple of things with the space cow, and there's going to be more. The exciting part of this is, in my opinion, the crafting potential and how it lines in with that. But this is also obviously a big event for players to be able to do. It's something extra. I don't think many people are joining Star Citizen for something like this, and this is definitely not the highlight of the show or anything. I think this is a very nice extra task that MMOs should have for people to do, not as the main draw, but as something that just builds more life and interest into the verse. You can talk all you want about whether or not they should be doing this now or what have you, but I do think including the harvestables and stuff is probably the saving grace here. If they didn't have that, I would say that's not worth doing all of this, but there's a lot more to them. And they have a little explanation of it here. Talk about more plans regarding fauna and just other types of how we can take advantage of this. This would be org level content. It's going to be great for GII.
The Valakar is very exciting, but I also want to share with you the bigger picture for creatures. So let's start with some Valakar variants. Variants so far have typically just had alterations to their loot and appearance. However, we want to go further with what variants can be. For example, what if the Valakar evolved and grew in a swamp environment instead of a desert planet? Or if a Valakar never made it to the surface and only lived in drowned caves? These are the kind of questions that make sci-fi one of the best mediums. And I can hear the questions already. What does an adult cave Valakar look like? What does an apex quasi-grazer look like? Well, it's these questions that get everyone excited that works on creatures to give you a glimpse into the big picture. All of these variances and differences and new creatures make up what we call our fauna matrix. The fauna matrix is basically our creature encyclopedia. So these concepts should show you that we want to get more weird and wonderful with our creatures. We've started off with more traditional animal references like dogs and birds and cows. But now we're in a position to create the things that we love about sci-fi, which is the weird and the unknown. So looking at where we're going, all of our creatures have been defined for the road to 1.0. We've ensured we've got a rich, diverse, distinct roster of creatures to make each of our planets feel special. As well, as considering the unique elements of various planets, ensuring that they're populated with appropriate creatures. We've been designing creatures in mind so that planets' ecosystems influence their behaviors, designs, aesthetics, and harvestables. With that being said, I would like to give you a sneak peek at our fauna.
Dude, don't these look kind of like weird fingers? It's really throwing me off.
Matrix. That's all from me. I'm very happy to be bringing the Valakar to all of our backers. It's really like nothing else you've played before. I'll leave you with this last video. Enjoy the rest of CitizenCon, everybody.
So here's everything they have planned for by the time 1.0 happens. I'm assuming we're going to see a couple more aliens this year. I mean, the sandworm seems like a good possibility. But I am also thinking if we do see the next system, it would likely include at least one new fauna. And we still know we have the Boreal Stalker. Where is that? I think that's on here somewhere. It's one of these guys. I can't see it. But the Boreal Stalker is something, which maybe they changed it up a bit. We got the Pyro Crab is still here, so that's going to come to Pyro at some point. I think it's on Pyro 3. I believe the Pyro Crab is found on Bloom. Don't know about any of these other ones, but yeah, I would guess there's at least one coming to Stanton and then one to Nyx this year. Ships for 2025. We've got this current selection, but I want to include what John says here because this is a selection of the ships that they are going to be working on this year, not necessarily releasing. So while a lot of these are pretty exciting, don't expect to see all of them this year. Just expect to see maybe progress on all of them this year.
Can't just leave without teasing a little bit more. So let's have a quick look at just some, emphasis on some, of the vehicles that we're working on in the next 12 months.
See, he also put emphasis on working on. I think, no, we have not seen this yet. We got this one already. I guess this is the drone variant. So this is the base building version. We have not gotten this, but we got the other version of it so far. We just saw this. I'm not sure why they put these on here. I guess they said next 12 months, not next year. Hey, Crude Basher, thank you for the kind words in chat. Appreciate you. Medipin, we got this one. This is the Guardian, which we got. Well, we think it's the Guardian. Some people still believe this is not the Guardian, but we will persevere. This is, people believe, the Misk Fortune. Thank you, chat. How many of you just looked at the screen wondering what happened to the sound? Yeah, sound gone. Yeah, Misk Fortune. Couldn't remember the name. Thank you. And it's supposed to, people think it's a salvage ship. I mean, it looks like the Prospector quite a bit. It's got something a little extra here. It's got a little laser here. Maybe this is a salvage laser. It's definitely got its thrusters back here, which we know well. And it looks like it has some form of an elevator in the back. So it's probably not for mining, but it looks like the Prospector. Good chance that this is a small personal salvage ship. And who knows, maybe this is a salvage ship that's mainly focused on... Oh. Wait a second. Y'all, I might have just developed a new conspiracy theory. What if this is a salvage ship that's focused on the component side of salvage? So, I don't even know what you would do to make a spaceship ready for that. Salvage charges, a cutting laser instead of just a salvage beam, the ability to cut through ships. You launch that with Maelstrom. Am I a little bit crazy? I might be. But how much more exciting does that sound? And then the space in the back is just a cargo space meant for components. That's what makes it special. Hard, heavy-duty cargo space with a salvage fuse crafting station. Oh, I don't mean this thing would take out the components. I mean, this is just meant for component retrieval. You'd still have to go out and get the components yourself. This is an unknown. Nobody really knows what this is. There are theories out there. Executed Inforunners believes it's a CNOU kind of ship. It looks like some form of a shuttle, but don't know much else besides that. And then this one is kind of wild. I can't even tell how big this is. It looks huge, but judging by the angle, it's really hard to tell what's going on. It definitely has Drake looks, given the shape language. This actually looks a lot like the command module from the Caterpillar. Obviously, Drake has wings that go up like this, but I can't really tell what the heck's going on here. Now this is the RSI Apollo. You can tell from the landing gear, you can tell from the thruster up here, the little spindle sticking out, the turret on the back. It screams Apollo. And I don't know if they'll release this year, because we haven't really heard much about medical, and I think they're gonna want to get something done with medical fairly serious before they bring this in, or else it's gonna be a very boring release, just doing the exact same thing we already like. Nobody wants to run medic on anybody else using a ship at this point, because medic beacons are broken and medical gameplay is not deep enough. So both those things I think need to be fixed before this ship makes any sense to bring in. Otherwise, this is just going to be a glorified respawn point. This one, oh, I love this ship. This is like my favorite MISC ship. This is actually, wait, hold on. No, I'm sorry. This is the build. I'm getting things mixed up. This is the build, the Starlancer build. So like base building focus. We kind of expected this. I saw the cockpit and I thought Odyssey, so I got excited. But the Odyssey is like my favorite MISC ship. This is the Starlancer build, I believe. Can't see the turrets of the TAC, so this is probably, there's something sticking out. No, that's the side turret. So this is probably the build version, which we would expect. Base building is a big focus of this next year, and we'll be talking about that in a couple minutes. Whoa. Jesus, that's loud. Sorry. All right, Perseus. This is, I think, actually pretty likely for this year. If there was one large ship I would actually expect to see this year, it'd be this, just coming off the back of the Polaris. This isn't as big as the Polaris. It's about the size of a hammerhead. It's got all of its gameplay included already, which is mainly combat. It has targets in the game. This gun is going to be great against things like the Hammerhead, the Polaris, even some smaller things like a Caterpillar. But yeah, it makes sense for us to get the Perseus this year, and it should be interesting. And the Ironclad, the Fatter Pillar, Mr. Iron Chad, whatever name you've got for it. A very industrial looking cargo hauler that I think people are really excited for, but I would not expect this to come out this year. I wholly believe they'll work on it, but it's a big ship, and I think it's going to take a little while. Although this is the predecessor to the Kraken, so maybe they want to get it out rather quickly. So those are ships. Now on to probably one of the bigger things that people are hoping for this year. I think CIG also is hoping for this year. It would be a big win if they could release it. Base building. I don't think we're going to see big time base building, large bases or org-sized facilities or anything like that. I think we'll start out by seeing some of this more personal stuff. But just to give you a little reminder of what base building looks like, I'm going to play this for you, and then we'll talk about maybe more specifics of what we might expect.
We found a beautiful location by a lake. This is where we'll build ourselves a home. To do so, we need some resources and the construction graph card. The construction graph card allows us to survey the land, claim the land in a lawful system, and it allows us to build structures. As we've already found the location and don't need to claim land in lawless pyro, we can straight dive into building our base. Keep in mind, the following UI is work in progress. A survey drone that deploys from the top of the card gives us a controllable augmented view of the land. In the new structure mode, we'll pick a small basic structure and hit construct. For this demo, the construction will be instantaneous, but in the final product, this will take you quite some time. We've done it. We've built our first structure. Let's have a look on the inside. As we walk into the small basic structure, we see an empty interior that is dimly lit. It's up to us to define what we will use this space for. In our case, we will want to make it into a home. We can see that the lights are still off, and that is a problem, because no lights means no atmosphere, no breathable atmosphere. So it's not ideal to live in. So how do we solve this issue? We can improve this by providing the building with power. Let's see if we can build something that helps us out. But before we dive into more building, let's take a quick moment to enjoy the freedom that the survey drone provides us with and admire the aesthetics of our first structure. And I wonder what Declan was up doing there. Keep in mind that base building is still work in progress, but what you're seeing right now has been recorded directly in the client and works seamlessly between first person and the building mode. Okay, enough. Back to base building. In the list of new structures, we see a small fuel generator. That is something that could solve our problem, I think. Power providing structures need to be hooked up to other buildings inside construction ER mode, but we'll explain this later. The fuel generator is one of several structures that provides power, each with their own benefit and drawbacks. Fuel power is quick and easy to build, but it requires a constant supply of fuel besides its regular maintenance. If a structure is not maintained, it will halt its activity. Players will need to maintain fuses to keep the building operational. The better crafted fuse, the longer it lasts. This is where the fuse goes on this building. Next up, we have a terminal that gives us access to the status of our building. And, more importantly, we get to activate it here. That should do it. Let's see if we got power in the building now. As you notice, some of the crates in the background have disappeared, as their content has been consumed during the construction process of the buildings. And it looks like Declan is now hooking up the power to the building. I wonder what he was up to earlier, though. Wow. Declan has been busy decorating the place. As we can see, the lights are now properly working. We got atmosphere, and we can start to use the item fabricator now that there is power. Always handy in case we need a fuse. Let's have a quick look at what we've done so far. We've decorated the place. We made it our own little home. We hooked it up with power. I would say we have a place that we can live in. It might not be much, but I think it's just enough to call it a home. Thank you.
So a lot to take from that. The crafting system overall is very well. It's more robust than I thought it was going to be. Now, I didn't think that we were going to be able to build things wall by wall. I know some people wanted a very modular building system. I think the prefab ideas like this, I don't know. I think it works better that way. I think if you're dedicating the whole game to building, it makes more sense to build things piece by piece. But base building is just like one part of this. And I don't think they want it to be an entire game loop and stuff. I think they want it to be more of a supporting game loop. So that aside, tying the power in, I don't know. When I thought they were going to introduce base building, I had low expectations. Not introduce, but kind of start to show off what they wanted to do. I had low expectations for where they wanted to go with it because I just thought it was going to be very light at first. But I'm actually pretty satisfied by what we see here. I like that it's taking into account power. It's working with resources. There is the ability for these things to be unpowered. Like, you've got to be able to maintain them and keep them running. You can't just spam bases everywhere. You need to make sure that they actually have maintenance. I mean, I shouldn't have doubted it, but it's pretty thought out. All right, so after this, they actually talk a little bit about how the base building is going to work, and some good details here.
Of small structures, and has been designed specifically to fit into the smallest ships, like the Drake cutter. The graph card allows us to survey the land, to find a good location, to claim the land with credits when we're in a lawful system, like Stanton, and, most importantly, it lets us build structures. To use the graph card, we will first need to deploy it. Once deployed, we see 2 small construction drones inside the card, and the interactive screen gets revealed to us. From here, we can deploy the survey drone from the extended top part of the card. This survey drone gives us a bird's-eye view of the surrounding area using augmented reality mode, ER mode for short. Let's have a look at some UI concepts of how this augmented reality mode will look like. Here's a concept of construction ER. From here, we get a more detailed view of the land. Where can and can't I settle? For an example, inside a nature reserve, construction will be prohibited. Are nearby areas flat enough to place my structures on? Are there any underground extraction deposits nearby? And if so, what are their quality and quantity? Let's say we found a good place to start building our base. Then next up, we need to find a good place for our first structure.
I want to go back. I really love that, this. I hope that this is insinuating that a lot more mining is going to take place underground, and this isn't just for base building, because I've always hated how way that mining works with the random boulder deposits. I would much prefer that we're scanning for and looking for like deposits in the ground that actually persist for some time and you can come to for a certain amount of time and then leave. Like the whole you found 5 boulders out in the middle of nowhere with some materials in it you want thing is just not my cup of tea for mining. And I hope this kind of stuff is not just for base building.
Let's say we found a good place to start building our base. Then next up, we need to find a good place for our first structure. On the left-hand side, we can see that we're now in structure creation mode. Underneath that, there is a list of structures that we can build. Once you have chosen a structure, you'll drag it onto the terrain, that will be shown then as a physicalized hologram. From here, you can move and rotate to find the perfect position for your structure. Now that we have chosen a position for our structure, we will need to supply it with crafting materials. Just like the crafting interface that we saw earlier, this is where you choose the materials, and the better materials you choose will result in a better structure. Once you're ready, we'll hit the craft button on the right bottom to send the construction drones printing to the buildings. The automated construction drones will take off from the construction graph card and fly to nearby resources to fill their internal storage and then fly over to the construction site to print the building until their internal storage has been depleted. The construction drone then repeats the loop by filling its internal storage again by nearby resources. Printing buildings will take some time. Keep the construction supplied so that you don't delay the process any further. Let's say our building did just finish printing, then what? Then we need power. We need to power the building. All structures will have an unpowered and a powered state that we can manage inside the resource manager. To provide structures with power, we can easily link generators to structures that need power in the resource management menu within Construction ER. We can also link multiple buildings together.
You know what they didn't? I don't think they've really talked too much about here is how we generate power. Maybe they haven't. It's slipping my mind, at least for CitizenCon this last year. But if you go back to the previous year, the base building panel, it had a slide about power. here.
That are more
Look at the things it talks about. Solar panels make a ton of sense, right? That makes so much freaking sense. Windmills, yeah, I could see that. Batteries, obviously, so we would have to, I don't know, figure out a way to transfer power to the batteries. Fusion power, okay, how does fusion power? Fuel generator makes a ton of sense. You just basically have to transport fuel. Yeah, hydrogen fuel generators that just make the power. Geothermal power. So a couple of these are really interesting. They talked about fuel, the fuel generators. Okay, cool. So besides fuel, that does make a ton of sense. These are really interesting. Let's skip fusion power because I'm not even gonna specify on that or try and speculate on that. Batteries make a ton of sense. Those are already in the ships. That's what engineering was waiting for to work. Batteries will work as batteries actually work in this game, and we will be able to charge and deplete them. That's actually how we're supposed to be doing. That's how we're supposed to be doing the missions that got delayed, the repair missions that got delayed from the outposts. I have a really interesting clip that I might be able to find that shows the very first times they were testing batteries. Let's see. It's really long ago. And I don't think... what would that be under? Security? I think it was they were testing them with security systems. So this was kind of showing the idea that you'd have these little batteries out here. You could turn off the big one. You could pick up this little blade battery, put it in. It would turn the power back on. And just showing the way that the circuit would work. That the power would actually function. You could actually disable power or power things back on with these. So yeah, this was like the first attempt at relays and batteries and like a power system, or one of the first attempts. And it's going to be blown up all the way to the size of bases. Solar panels interesting because like you could basically put your base on a moon or a planet that never sees darkness. Like you could have a base that is focused entirely on generating power and then sell batteries. You could have all your bases everywhere else on the entire planet that don't have their own ways of generating power. And then you could have one base that's all solar panels up at the top at the pole or something. I don't know, somewhere where the sun never goes down, and just ship power back and forth. You could do the same with windmills if there's a more windy location. I don't know how that's going to work with dynamic weather, but we'll see. Geothermal is also an interesting one because I'm wondering, are we going to get geothermal readings? Are you just going to show us this is a place where a geothermal power plant could go? How does that work? But the whole idea of needing to manage your resources for a base is another step up from just the ship-based engineering.
Can assess the power consumption and shortage of inside this resource management screen. Keep in mind that operational structures like power generators require maintenance of their fuses and sometimes need supplies coming in and going out to be managed. Now that we have a structure and power, what can we do next? Then we can actually upgrade our structure. Structures can be upgraded from tier 1 till tier 3. The better material you provide, the better the improvement will be. Just like Jacob and Thorsten explained in the crafting presentation. Tier upgrades can, for example, improve the structural integrity of the building or make its resource consumption more efficient. To really make your base feel like home, you will want to decorate your base with a wide variety of furniture pieces that can be bought, crafted, and found in the universe. It's up to you to define what you want this space to be. Do you want to decorate it as a hospital? Do you want to make it into a workshop? Do you want to make it into a luxurious bedroom? It's up to you. Furniture can easily be placed and moved using decorative ER mode as a hologram. This is so your furniture can easily fit through doors. This feature is accessible through nearby construction devices, allowing you to place down furniture pieces or even crafting machines that otherwise wouldn't fit through the door. And you get to place them directly from your local inventory. Mag lock their furniture into place so that only you and your friends get to rearrange your decorations.
Stream Santa moment.
Best of all,
Can we get Santa in chat, please?
decorative ER is not exclusive to base building
Santa
and
metal.
can also be used for personal hangars and ships.
This is going to be really nice because currently trying to place things in the game is awful. I can't wait for that. I think that this is the extent of base building we would see in 2025 if we saw it. Then there's also crafting, though. This I'm a little bit less sure of. Oh, look at all the Santas. Oh, we don't have a Santa command. We probably need that, don't we? They don't talk too much about crafting, but crafting is like the same as base building, and we technically kind of do it in the Vulture already. So I don't really know what the story is with crafting. I'm not sure where they are, like where they're going with it. I guess they actually showed more base building in the engine than they showed crafting. I imagine crafting would depend entirely on this whole material system coming in. And I think of it, base building might depend on that too. So whenever this does happen, whatever way they do it, whether it's this year, well, 2025, or the following year, it's going to be a really, really big moment because it's going to have to update all these things like materials, which that's going to touch everything. Every single thing. That's going to touch shipping. As cargo haulers, materials will suddenly change their value. Is it going to touch salvage? What you can look for while you're salvaging? Mining? The whole point of mining is going to touch base building, obviously, and what players are actually doing with their time, missions, or building bases and stuff like that. Like, I think up until now, I've just kind of underestimated how big the update is going to be, where they even make the initial patch for this system because of the way it's going to have to change materials.
To provide structures with power,
I'm wondering how involved we're going to be able to get with water, because it's both a resource that we need to run it, each building, but I think it's also something we'd probably be able to sell as a commodity. So I wonder if we're going to have things like in Satisfactory where you have to suck up the water to run your plants. Let's look at crafting. Let's look at what crafting takes. Because up here they talk about the actual process of doing it.
You will start with acquiring the correct blueprints as the first step in the crafting process. As Jacob already mentioned, blueprints can be acquired in multiple ways. Let me give you some examples here. You can purchase commonly available blueprints, earn them from reputation and mission rewards, or even find them in loot crates. All content in our game could reward you with a blueprint. Some blueprints will be challenging to find, so players working together may find them easier to acquire. While you may find a blueprint on a datapad or other portable device, the blueprint itself is not a physical item. You don't collect them in a box or stack them on a bookshelf. Blueprints are digital. Once you claim one, it is permanently added to your personal library. This library is persistent to your character, and every blueprint you claim is yours forever. They cannot be stolen or traded once claimed. But it does not just end with acquiring blueprints. Those tiers of quality that Jacob mentioned are unlocked through blueprint research. Research requires a research data bank which can upgrade your blueprints. Upgrading here means that you unlock a blueprint that allows you to create a better, higher tier version of the same item using more advanced materials. Note, you will still have access to the lower tier versions if you want to craft the cheaper version. In order to upgrade a blueprint, you may need to perform certain actions. In this example, we need to craft 100-volt pistols and have one with a higher fire rate. Other examples would be collect resources, complete missions, or acquire research data from the Science Guild. Research is time-intensive, in addition to the action requirements. It will take time for the research data bank to process your research data and unlock the upgrade. You are also limited in how many research projects you can pursue at once. Now that you have your blueprint and you decided what to craft, you also know what resources to look for. Every blueprint you find will have unique requirements in their resource needs. It will not just be you need iron. We want to make use of the professions we have to meaningfully involve them in the crafting process. Especially for the more advanced blueprints, you can expect that it will require materials from multiple sources. And, as already mentioned by Jacob, pay attention to the quality. If you want to have the perfect item, you also need the best quality. Here, the best way to find the best resources is to get out and explore the world. If you want to find the best hidden materials, then you get yourself a top quality radar. Once you collected the raw materials, the next step is refining them. Refining, like crafting, requires blueprints. Refining blueprints take primary, secondary, and catalyst materials and produce refined materials. The rule is...
Now, we had refining actually in the works quite a couple years back. They were working on player refining for ships. And I think this is part of the reason we never saw it, is they realized they needed to make sure it would work well with the crafting system or with whatever they were going to do with materials. And then they were like, oh, we're going to have to do all that before we can actually make sure crafting works. At least I'm hoping that's what happened, because the fact that they did not put refining in earlier, like if they had done refining and then refining, I can guarantee we probably would have seen some kind of weird rework to refining right now to fit what they're doing for crafting. So either they held off on doing refining on purpose because of this, or it's good that they had to, because it was a kind of a bit of a focus back in the monthly reports, I think 2 or so years ago, 2 to 3 years ago. Are you right in thinking no more wipes until 1.0? That's what they would like to do. I'm guessing they're still going to have to do at least one more. And then the 1.0 wipe. But I think that it's going to be a lot less than we're used to. What mic do I use? The Shure MV7.
Very simple. The quality of the primary raw material defines the quality of the refined material. The secondary material you put in has an impact on the quantity and the time the refining process will take. An optional catalyst can speed up the process further. Let me give you a simple example. If you want high quality steel, you need to put in the best iron you have in the primary slot. You can put any quality coal in the secondary slot without affecting the quality of the steel. But the quality of the coal will influence how much of it you need to produce steel. As an example, if you put in low quality coal, you might require 4 SCU of coal versus high quality coal that only requires 2 SCU. This is one of the important use cases for low quality materials that Jacob mentioned. You can use refining stations in the world as they will be converted to this new process. You can build your own refineries for yourself, you can get your org to help you out, or you can simply trade for the materials that you need on the open market. Now, we are reaching the final step. You got the blueprints, you gathered resources, and refined materials. Now you can create the item you want. And this item can be anything. You will be able to craft anything from FPS equipment to vehicle components, even entire vehicles and buildings. You just need access to the relevant crafting machine. Talking about crafting machines. We will have a variety for you that differ in what process they can support, like a refinery or a dedicated vehicle crafting machine. We will also find them in various places. There will be communal ones like the station refineries you already know, player-owned that can be in your personal hangar, a vehicle, or your base. As all that we have talked about just now, these crafting machines also come in tiers. Here, the tiers will affect how well those machines do their job. You will not only progress in the products you produce, but also in the infrastructure to produce your wares. Just to give you an idea what you will encounter, here are some examples of the crafting machines. There is the nutrition fabricator, the chemical fabricator, an item fabricator, and even fabricators of a much larger scale we will talk about later. Talking about scale, I would like to talk about the future of crafting and the scale it will have in the game that you all know, and how it will change the game moving forward. As you all know, we have a lot of items in the game, and they all require their own unique blueprints. That means our aim is to have more than 1,000 blueprints that include the creation and the refining blueprints. And each of those can be researched to unlock tier upgrades up to tier 3 or tier 5. That's a lot of blueprints. And it will surely take a lot of time to unlock everything. So I, personally, recommend that you, as the crafter you are, focus on a specific field first and extend your knowledge from there. Collaborate and coordinate with your friends and fellow players. If you are part of a group, we invite you to share responsibilities with your org mates. Maybe you will be the FPS crafter while your friend is a ship crafter, but they know a ship component crafter specialist. There's a lot of content, and it will continue to grow over time. You are free to be a generalist crafter, a specialist, or something in between. Pick the blueprints you care about and be the best. Have an exotic shield generator that no one else has the blueprint for but you. Help others and earn credits while doing so. It is a real profession in the game that will benefit from your dedication and attention. As you can tell, crafting will have a huge impact on everything in the game. Even if you do not want to get actively involved, at some point you will stumble over a weapon that got crafted by someone else, and you will be using it.
I do wonder if we will see player selling next year. That's a big part of this. I think that's one of the most interesting parts of all of this is the idea of being able to host a shop to sell stuff that you're crafting or stuff that you find. If they brought player sales and trading into the game next year, that'd be such a big boost to how this game works. Yeah, there's actually there's a lot of things that they need to do before this works. There's no ownership system that's working. There's no real good trading system that's working. Beacons aren't really working. The material system obviously needs to get some work. The economy needs to be working. There's a lot of stuff that has to be functional for this to actually work in terms of at least the selling. So maybe that ends up coming a little bit later. Maybe they just focus on the very specific base building that they're doing right now. But I think that's partially why crafting is a little bit more difficult, maybe because it's more based on the idea that you're making stuff for other people and not just yourself. You can make a base for other people, but it's not as common. Next up is server meshing. Server meshing is open to the public with 4.0. It's having its problems, obviously, and it's also having its successes. It has successfully expanded the size of game instances in Star Citizen by 400%. Wait, no, by 500 to 600%. It has made the game run more smoothly in terms of the server frame rate. But it also has plenty of login issues for some people. There are some input lag problems going on. It's not all perfect, but it's out. The last message that I can find on this stuff, and you guys please correct me if I'm wrong, but the last thing I could find on their overall testing, besides like what was being said in IC or Inside Star Citizen or Star Citizen Live, was this. They were doing a test on... Wait, is this the wrong one? Oh, it's this one. Yeah, sorry, it's this. They were doing they did a test of 2,000 players in an instance, which ran terribly, of course. But then they also did tests of lower players. And they had some observations that they gave us. When at 1,000 plus player concurrency, loading screens were long and observed across many players, loading late into the game. This was caused by waiting for a free hap to spawn in. This is something they changed with 4.0 with the spawning in hangars. Looking to see if queuing mechanism to ease the spawning process can help. Also looking at other spawning options, more on this later. Yeah. Observed several issues occurring with the ASOP during the high player count test, where the terminals would appear stuck when waiting for ships or hangars to be unstowed. We don't have that, I don't think, anymore. Some players were seen quantum jumping through a server boundary but never actually pivot to the new authority, causing them to be effectively lost. Appeared as if no controls worked. Investigation underway. I haven't encountered that one either. Guessing they got that one figured out. I mean, this is all before the testing even went to Evocati. So obviously a lot of work was done since this report. And there have been other things they've said about server meshing since then. But I was looking for some specific messaging from Balt, aka Benoit, about their dynamic. Maybe I could do a search on that in a second. A game server with 400 players went through successful server crash recovery. The team cheered. So that's really what we landed on, was like 5 to 600 players. So they were testing at 6 servers with 800 players at that point. We ended up going back down to 5 to 600 players, I think 8 servers maybe, or something like that at this point. And what we'll be looking for next year is what they settle into for the regular, if they're going to need to settle for a certain amount of servers per players, if they make progress on getting more players in a shard over time, how long does it take for them to advance past 5 to 600 players again, is what I'm saying. And I think that's not been talked about as much for next year, because we're still talking about like getting 4.0 stable with that number of players. But I do think that's an important thing to keep in mind for next year. I'm going to do a quick search real quick and see if I can find the part where he was talking about dynamic server meshing. It's not there. So I don't have that information, but they've also said that they have been doing a lot of testing in tech to lead to dynamic server meshing. So that might also be a topic next year of where are things with progress on dynamic server meshing. Okay, I also wanted to go back to the letter from the chairman. Not this most recent one, actually. I wanted to go back to the earlier one this year, because I think it also has some interesting insight that's not necessarily said on the new one. Going back to where he was talking about kind of what's going on moving forward. This is Chris, is he? This is some stuff that I kind of mentioned a bit in my video last week, but I want to go into more detail about this. Here's some comments said about what Rich wants to do with the game as he became the senior game director for both games. Firstly, I'd like to take this opportunity to say how great it is to be back working on Star Citizen. Some of you may already know me, but I was the core gameplay pillar director before I moved over to become the game director on Squadron 42 a few years back. With this new role, I will be coming on board to help push Star Citizen to the next stage of its development, ultimately culminating in leaving early access and releasing the 1.0 version of the game. This begins with identifying what features and content are required to create a fully realized space MMO while laying the foundation for future updates. To be 100% clear though, this doesn't mean going back to the drawing board or totally changing the vision of what SC currently is. With this aim, Chris and I have overseen the creation of a roadmap that takes us all the way up to 1.0 and outlines all the features and content we need, and just as crucially, the ones that will come post-release. With my role now overseeing both projects with Chris and the fact that Squadron 42 has hit its feature complete milestone, it has provided It has provided an opportunity to reshuffle the teams. This should see a larger contingent of gameplay teams now coming back to focus on Star Citizen. We've also taken the opportunity to move away from heavily specialized teams like actor feature and vehicle feature to more generic gameplay teams that should allow us to be a lot more flexible and shoulder some of the heavier burdens those teams used to carry. While these teams will still be instrumental in shipping Squadron 42, they will now be focused on bringing all the existing features over to Star Citizen, as well as working on brand new features like base building and crafting to help round out the 1.0 experience. With every release going forward, the intention is to move ourselves closer to that end goal, so you should expect to see large updates each quarter, with many changes to systems that have not been touched in a long time like economy, insurance, etc. Alongside a whole suite of quality of life improvements to things like inventory, missions, mobiGlass, etc., coupled with totally brand new features and content. We have set very ambitious goals for ourselves internally, both for the game and technology teams, but Chris and I truly believe they are achievable, and hopefully you can start to see that progress starting with 323 and beyond. So, a lot of that didn't pan out quite how he wanted it to, at least not yet. The idea that the teams would come over from Squadron 42 to focus on Star Citizen hasn't happened. It has happened to some extent, but devs have been going back and forth. It hasn't been as clear cut of a transition as they wanted, and I really don't think we've seen the results of that on the PU anyways just yet. Going back to the regular cadence of 4 updates per year is actually pretty important, because I think there's a pretty decent amount of the Star Citizen community now that just doesn't even know that's a thing. Like, if we go all the way back to the beginning, March 31st, 2018, you can see that they had an update in this quarter, and then an update in the next quarter, and then an update kind of in the next quarter. It's like a little late because June to November, you're 4 months instead of 3. June, July, August, September, October, November, 5 months. Yikes. Yeah, that first year was rough. And then one in December, April, July, October, December, April, August, October, December, April, August, November, December. And then we get to 2022 where 318 happened. So starting at the beginning of 2022, really. Yeah, 316 was our last normal update. So anybody really who's joined since 2022 has not experienced what Star Citizen's development was supposed to feel like, which was a regular update every 3 months that would bring something actually consistent to the game. Now, I'm not saying that those previous updates were amazing. These were adding a whole bunch of like really basic kinds of things that were rather scattershot. But they did, they brought some changes. It's just that the consistency of that and the understanding of how updates worked broke down a lot when 317 hit, and the update landed in April. And we got 317.2 that summer, which was the size of one of these normal updates, but not an actual new update. So 318 didn't show up until March. After that, we got 319, sure, and 320. But then we got 321 and 322, and this was like 3 updates split up because they were so light. And 319 was just trying to fix 318, so it wasn't like the real deal. And then we got 3.23 in May instead of in March, and 324 took till August, but it was really just part 2 of 323, and then 4.0 came at the end of this year, but it's kind of lost some features to 324, so really we just got like 2 updates this year. It's just been different. So that point of them wanting to go back to 4 updates a year is something that I think we should be very, very closely watching. And next year, it would be good to see 4 solid updates at the time that they're expected, with decent amounts of change for players to sink their teeth into, and some solid quality of life. How are people feeling going into 2025? Well, I guess that's a great way to kind of wrap things up here. I haven't covered everything that we might see, obviously, next year. There's a lot that we don't know. I think the best thing to take away from this is, like, there are some really big level stuff that could be happening, but it's all sort of question mark because CIG has done the right thing and not set our expectations for next year. They've left us with a kind of functional 4.0 and the promise that it will be fixed in the new year and running better, but nothing else beyond that. And I think that's probably a good idea on their part. They need to sit down for January, figure out what's going on, what they have available, what they don't, and what they can do before they start setting our expectations for what's going to happen. Because I'm betting that by March or April of last year, they were really regretting doing that. So I don't know if they'll tell us what's actually coming at any point. But these are, I think, some of the big things we can expect. I also think FPS scanning would probably be something that we'll see. Literally just popped up in chat. Yeah, quantum travel could be something. Quantum boost. I do think we'll see some more missions and just some more opportunities to play. I don't know, the big thing that's sticking out for me that I don't know what to say about is all of this stuff. Like all of the new social apps. If anything, I would say this is one of those things that they should get in next year. At the very least, VoIP updates should be one of the highest priorities in the company right now. So this was all conceptual stuff when they showed it at CitizenCon. I don't know what they have planned for this. So we'll have to see, but maybe we'll also see some new social apps kind of stuff next year. I don't expect any floodgates.